All right, well, let's get rolling. John Dailey, I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while because we've been chatting about when we can get together. And as I mentioned, I reached out to you just because both of your accounts on Substack just resonate with my soul on how you talk about getting after it, the wisdom that you had in uniform and you developed post-military career. But I had no freaking idea that, I mean, I knew you released the book that's sitting behind me and I knew aspects of your powerful story, but as soon as we agreed to a time, and then I see you're on my friend Gina's podcast, and then I learned that you're on all of these other ones like Sam Alimo back in the day. He
Yeah.
a conversation. I'm like, oh shit! So I went back and listened to that, and then I'm a big fan of Jack Carr and the Terminalist series. Like listening to that podcast was cool because I'm a fan of both of you. But then hearing how your careers overlapped at one point during
Yeah.
it's just wow. So what I'm excited to talk to you about is not your military career, which in these podcasts, you go through that I'll be linking in the post. You go through all the amazing stories, your pivotal role in Detachment One and kind of the transition of the Marine Raiders of World War II to the Marine Raiders of today. And as I mentioned earlier, I was at Camp Lejeune Station there when the name officially took hold. I know it kind of formulated much earlier. But man, what a ride that you've been on to go from your military career that was outstanding to what you now do, which is mentoring, training, and educating the Raiders in the same community that you operated.
Yeah. I certainly can't complain. I've been as lucky as a man can get in every regard, I really feel like. So it's awesome to be able to still, show up every day and around the incredible individuals who are, uh, yes, have to be much, much smarter than I ever did, have to be, much, more well-rounded. The battlefield is changing so incredibly rapidly that, there's just so much more they have to know. We were considered, good Marines if we could carry a lot of weight and, um, didn't complain too much, but it's awesome. Yeah, I'm a lucky man.
Yeah, I love talking to former name the service, name the community about their transition out. And typically that's one of the most challenging aspects of the trials they've been through is to go from a tight knit community, a very specialized um, task and mission to the world. You, however, have a wonderful story because I believe you were out of uniform at the end of a week and then started work again on Monday doing a very similar role.
Yes, yeah. There's generally speaking, there's it's called a cooling off period. There's a period of time, like 6 months or a year, where you're not allowed to work directly to. During the war, that was suspended, and so I was required to kind of have 2 weeks, during which I still had my work cell phone, and during which people were still calling me, and I had already been told that I had got the job. So it wasn't much of a 2 weeks off, but it was a little bit. But there was still so much to do because MARSOC was just starting up, and we're preparing to establish the course to train the first Raiders. So I have said it a million times that I really didn't feel like I transitioned for about 4 or 5 years. After working as a civilian and like I said in the same office, and then finally it clicked one day that hey, I'm not. I can't be the guy that cares the most about this. They're Marines. They're competent. They're capable. I'm here to support them, help them. I'm not here to lead them. I'm here to mentor them. And, that was a big mental shift. But, I absolutely did not have the difficult transition time that a lot of people do.
And that, if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, 17 years ago is when you exited service and then became civilian supporting.
Yes. Yeah. A little over.
A little
A
over,
little over. Yeah. Approaching 18 at this point. So,
but mentally it was more like 14. You said it was 3 or 4 years
yeah.
before you
Yeah. Right.
got out of that. But
And
yeah, when you're
sometimes I
used to,
still forget, but
well, when you're used to being on the ground, getting after it alongside, you got to shift to that mentor mindset, and it's very hard when you're a doer. I mean, you're still obviously doing, which is like what I want to talk to you mostly about in your own capacity, but guiding from the outside, imparting your wisdom rather than being alongside it. That's got to be a challenge, but at the same time, one worth undertaking.
yeah, absolutely. It's rewarding, to get to show up every day. And I think it absolutely keeps me young at heart or whatever, at least, showing up, going in the gym with these young guys, getting to kind of walk around, talk to them how they're doing, getting them to come in the office and say, hey, can I talk to you about this or that? So both the students and then the instructors that I've seen now is when they were students coming back through, some of them 2 times, 3 times. So, over a 20-year career that I've almost seen all of it. So it's pretty amazing seeing them when they come back from deployment, seeing them when we lose, teammates. It's, I just been fortunate. I mean, nearly 40 years, I've kind of had the opportunity to be around, great people, and then help out. So,
Beautiful. Obviously, you were in shape when you were in uniform, but I'm curious. I love to think about the skill of discipline, and in the military, it's kind of easy to be disciplined. You're forced to be, so you have to adhere to the rule sets that you're given based on the community that you're in. Whatever that standard might be, may vary based on your job, but obviously, as a raider without the name raider, you were in shape and uniform. Was it because you stayed adjacent to the raiders and mentoring them? Did you already have self-discipline in uniform, or was that a skill that you had to cultivate yourself when you got out?
I I'd say I had a good bit of it, but I definitely had to, there was expectations and there were, you knew you couldn't let the team down. So you had to, generally in special operations, you're given quite a bit of latitude to, work out on your own. It's not as rigid as, movies, when you see, Marines or soldiers like running down the road together singing songs. We didn't do that. Um, so right when I got out, I knew there was like something missing, and I knew that I needed to do hard stuff. So I got into, and it was, I mean, that was part of it. My son was going into high school as well, and I had convinced him to run cross country as, because I loved it. Felt like I got a lot out of cross country, and we went out for a run, and he was falling back, like a 3 mile run, and then we went out again, the next day and a couple days later, and within the space of a month, he was just flying past me. So I went, and again, I'm, one of the I kind of go overboard. I have a tendency to go overboard. So I was like, hey, let me go to the bookstore, see if I can find some books on training so we can do some supplemental training and, in addition to whatever your coach is doing. And on the bookshelf, beside the like high school cross country training book, there was a book that had just come out called Ultra Marathon Man, as Dean Karnassus. And at that point, I'd never heard of an ultra marathon. So I got it. I crushed it in like a day or two, and then this was 2010, and this was relatively new, not a new sport, but it was small, very niche, and there was not a lot of info on the internet about it at the time. But I found a race, 50 miler, signed up. I had like 2 months to go from a guy who ran 3 miles occasionally to somebody who could run 50. And, once I got into it, I loved the challenge of it, the sport. So I really, really got in big, like too big, I guess, for about 10 years. So I was, just, looking for more challenging races, longer races, things like that. So that definitely helped, stay in shape. And the sometimes I think I want to go back to that, but the time that it takes is, I mean, just like on a Saturday morning saying, hey, I'm out for a 40 miler. I'll be back in 8 hours is, I have too much on my plate for that anymore.
Yes, sir. So I'd love to go back to 2010 then, when you went from 3 miles to a 50 mile in a couple months. I'm sure you're using the knowledge that you gained from that book that you read, but that first 50 miler, how'd that go for you?
It, it was, oh, I forget the name of the race, but it was up in Virginia. Um, and I had not run a lot because most of my Marine Corps career was out in California. Um, so, roots and rocks, certainly, but mostly, well, pretty decent trails. And then running out here flat, got up in Virginia and it was single track. It was really challenging. I mean, you really had to pick up your feet, which is something I didn't do, especially when I started getting tired. But I took off, of course, way too fast and got on this single track where you had to keep going, right? There were people behind you, people in front of you. There's no way to get out. Um, Eventually, we came up to a hill where there was the ability to kind of get to the sides, and a bunch of the young guys in front of me took off, and there was an old man at the time, probably my age, but now it was like I started running up this hill. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, I'm running this race, man. He was like, well, walk with me. And this guy just went through and he was like, I won this race the first 3 years they put it on, like 20 or 30 years ago. Um, so he really like filled me in, on just tons of tips, things to think about. So I, that was probably like 17, 18 miles at that point. And I would have blown up if I had kept at the rate that I was going. It was hard, but I think in training, I had done a 35 or 40 miler. And so I was, it wasn't that big of a jump. So that one, I learned. I mean, you just learn so many lessons, right? And of course, I was ready to like jump in the next one a month later, and uh, it's it's a great sport. I mean, the internet, the thing that I loved about it is that there's a ton of former military or current military that run, but there's also very random like scientists and brewers and just weird kind of people that's really they put they set on and really have, pace plans laid out and fueling plans. And so you can learn so much from people. And there's so much time involved and there's obviously a lot of walking involved for most, ultra marathoners. So you get to just, meet new people, talk to new people. And the thing that when I set out to run a 50 miler, of course, everybody that I talk to is like, man, that's crazy. I don't like to drive that far or whatever they say. But after you've run one or two, then you're hearing people talk about, 100 milers. And then it doesn't seem crazy anymore, or 100K, then 100 milers, and people doing like 7-day, just continuous loop races. And that, you start to realize that, the capabilities that we have as humans to continue to do hard things. So.
And there are very few people in this world that I enjoy who write on that exactly what you just said as well as you do. And you come at it from like you go hard in the paint for sure, but you also have nuance to your writing because you're a beautiful writer, but you also have the appreciation of you don't go from couch to 100 miles, but we all possess the capacity to do so. It starts in here and in here, but most importantly, it comes from actually doing it. Like you said, you learn so much by actually getting out there and doing it. And how cool in your first race you end up walking alongside a guy who 20 years earlier was owning it, but he's
Yeah.
changed his pace, he's changed his wisdom, and also his body, his age, but imparts that wisdom to you verbally while you're also getting it through the experience of doing the damn thing. Because you can read all the books in the world and have all this knowledge, but it won't be wisdom until you get out there and actually apply it. And so that comes across in your writing basically every time that you bring up a concept from your past or present. And it's such an important point because that knowledge means nothing without the experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You gotta, uh, you can't get to your objective without stepping off. you gotta do something, right? The Lao Tzu, one of the Chinese, say the journey of 1,000 miles starts the first step.
Oh,
And that's, you know, a lot of people want to, overthink things and, spend too much time trying to dig into the details of, knowing everything and having everything perfect. I've been I've never been that guy. I've been the guy, the kind of ready, shoot, aim guy, which has not always been the best. But at the end of the day, I'd rather make that mistake than error on the other side.
and those mistakes will be lessons to help you recalibrate going
Yeah.
forward. Without the mistakes, then you think you have it figured out. No one has it all figured out. Um, but you explore edges and you realize your edges can be much further than where you perceive
Mhm.
them. So you did the 50 miler, and like you said, you start thinking 100K, 100
Mhm.
miles. How far did you go with that? Because you said it was 10 years of pursuing that ultra marathon type endeavor.
Um, the longest I did a race from the Virginia border on the beach to the South Carolina border, so across the state, 367 miles, and that was obviously multiple days, a week almost. Uh, it, that was absolutely the longest. I decided I was going to try to run 100 miler every month for a year, and I did not make that. I made it to July. I think I skipped August, hit September and October, and called it quits. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's once you start pushing yourself, I think in any endeavor, then you hopefully you have. I mean, one of the things, and I've said this countless times, the thing that I would credit whatever level of success I've had to is just being really, really fucking curious. I'm always just wanting to know what can I do? What's possible? What's next? What's the next hard thing? Um, because I've got this, and it absolutely comes from the Marine Corps. I'm sure there was some of it there when I joined, but you know, being around the people that I worked with and kind of being within the community that I was, we're just always looking for something to kind of prove yourself.
Yeah, and then you go into these niche realms of whether it's your military career or now ultra marathons, like you said, the characters you meet, there's going to be different approaches, but you want to meet interesting people. Find your personal hard that you enjoy and then get after it as much as possible and talk to the people doing it. Because wow, there's so many amazing people out there that'll show you the potential that humans possess. And you said it, curiosity, being inquisitive with yourself, with what's possible. Hell yeah. And, you said you did a bunch of 100 milers. Did you ever try to tackle one of those in less than 24 hours?
I did. I think I've done three and sub 24. Um, the one that's relatively local out here by in the Croatan, a 24-hour race I did and hit 100 miles. And the Uwari that's up, or not Uwari, I'm sorry, Umstead, that's up near Raleigh. That was the fastest I ran, and that was, I latched on to a buddy of mine, and he wouldn't let me stop. So I think like
Oh, yeah.
22 hours as so a couple times. But yeah, that's a feat. I mean, that was right at the edge of my ability. So there were plenty of them that I was finishing in 39 hours, at the 40-hour cutoff up in the mountains of North Carolina. So
I love endless pursuits and seeing what's possible, but accomplishments are pretty cool. And definitely, if you were to say I have a bucket list, one of the ones on the bucket list, because it's funny, we'll talk about the Ruck 2025 challenge. I've covered long distances in triathlons, but that's been with biking and swimming.
hmm.
I've never actually run a marathon, let alone my goal one day of doing 100 miles in less than a day. And I actually have a development buddy on Substack who invited me to do one September of next year. So rather than getting out there, I mean, obviously getting out there and
Uh,
training, building the physical capacity to get your time on feet
hmm.
and the miles in, and any wisdom in trying to tackle that kind of challenge for 100 miles in a day.
Yeah, you've it's it kind of depends on the race, obviously. Which one you're doing, the hills and things like that. But just staying on top of nutrition is really, really, hydration and nutrition is really important. I mean, you've kind of got to, um, for me anyway, you want to run a faster first half, but not exceptionally so. I mean, it starts to come on you, kind of in waves. Somewhere usually for me between like at the normal like marathon bonk time of, and I've never run a marathon either. An actual 26.2. I'm saving up the run the Marine Corps marathon one day, but yeah, somewhere between like 22, 24, like I'll hit a brick wall. And then, somewhere around 28, 30, that goes away. And it's great out to 50. And then the sun goes down. And then, uh, so yeah, I mean, really, I think probably the biggest thing is just having a good attitude the whole time during it. Um, One of the things I always really try to do is because I hate to see a runner come into, and I volunteered at plenty of races, a runner come into an aid station and they're bitching and moaning, they're yelling at the volunteers that are working there. And, so I absolutely try to, when I see the lights of the aid station, kind of put on a smile, start thinking through in my head, hey, here's the three things I need to do. I need to refill my water. I need to get something to eat. I need to change my socks, whatever that might be, take care of a blister. But then when I come in, just, be cheerful as hell, even if I feel like shit after I leave. But it does no good to, to be an asshole. That's to anybody. That's one of my, I feel like that's a karma thing where that'll come back on you.
And it's draining. Like, the energy it takes to be unproductive in your head. It's not serving, of course, anyone else around you who's there to help you in this case,
Hmm.
or possibly if it's not actually an aid station and volunteers.
Hmm.
It's draining. So, productive attitude and focus on a particular task.
Yeah.
When you hit those walls, I'm curious. Do you have mantras, or like what have been your developing methods to deal with the walls we inevitably hit in the hard stuff, and then also how it translates to life with the hard stuff where it's not an intentional pursuit of struggle?
I mean, in running, I not necessarily mantras. Sometimes I'll just like sing a song in my head, just whatever song that might be. Um, I there are definitely a lot of people that do. Sometimes in the middle of the night, you'll go by somebody, and you can hear them like one step in front of the other. That's really my kind of what I'm thinking. I'll pick something. I'm like, I can absolutely get to that next tree. And then if I want to quit, I want to fall down, I'll do it. And then when I get to that tree, there's going to be another, and one of the kind of really early like founders of ultra marathons that, had the record for the Appalachian Trail. He had the transcontinental record, um, put on a lot of races in Virginia. Um, and he had a saying that it doesn't always get harder. And I think I wrote a post about that. That at some point, you get to an aid station, uh, the first 100K that I ran, was it just was rooty, rocky, nasty. I had not ever tackled anything like that, and I thought running 50 miles was, um, I'm like, I've run a couple 50 milers. I'm ready for a 100K, and there's a long distance between, 50 miles and 62, much longer than it should be, right? Um, and I was just chafed and bleeding and, out of my head. I didn't think I was going to make the cutoff time, and made it to an aid station, and those, they just absolutely they took care of me and made me I was like, I gotta go. They're like, no, just sit down. You're gonna, you'll be a new man when you leave. We're making you a grilled cheese sandwich on like a propane stove, and gave me some chicken noodle soup, and, took care of me. And by the time I left, I'm like, yeah, all right, now I've got this. Like their positivity was absolutely contagious. And so, it doesn't always, when the sun comes up, that's kind of one of the greatest things, when you've been moving all night through the woods, and sudden, you're falling asleep on your feet, and suddenly the sun comes up, you get this incredible boost. So it's, there's always something to look forward to, I guess.
Yeah, and again, that translates so well to life. Like the mindset you can when you are in your perceptive hell, like the ways that you can get through these walls or whatever you want to call them, where you feel like you just can't go any longer. Something I like to say that when I explore my respective edges and some of these physical pursuits I've done, um, I've learned that stress is not linear. I used to think it was like it's building up, it's building up, it's building up, it's building up. I explode or I quit or just I can't take it any longer. And you had a powerful post today or yesterday that I want to talk about, when it comes to self talk and then marrying that with standards. So we'll get to that later when it comes to inner culture. But yeah, like how you view what is possible, like whether it's the next landmark or just knowing that like this feels like it keeps getting harder, but that is also a feeling. It's not actually reality. And when you've dealt with enough waves, whether that's through an isometric hold for longer than you could the next time, like there's going to be waves, no matter how adapted you are, you're going to hit these respective walls. But remembering, having that wisdom from before, like, hey, it doesn't always get harder. There will be opportunity to get better. Hell yeah. Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's the word distress, and I was looking this up for a post, right? There's another word, eustress, that's, beneficial stress. That word wasn't invented until like the 60s, so it's not really but it's, the everything is, if you live, it becomes eustress, like good stress. All right, if you are drowning and you don't drown. I mean, if you drown, then yeah, that's sad. That's the end of it, right? That was, you were in distress and you died. But if you don't, then you have the opportunity to frame it how you want. You're like, yeah, I almost died, but man, I survived like a lot. So you can let that, whatever the challenge or the failure or the hard times or you can focus on that, or you can choose to say, you know what, I made it through that thing. And if I made it through that, then I can make it through the next thing. And that's a choice. I think there's absolutely people who are probably more inclined to view things that way. But all of us can learn to view things that way but in order to do it, you've gotta put yourself in positions of distress and then get out and
And
not
then
die.
and not die is very important. But like you said, how you view stress is really important too. Because I was one of those people as a kid, just through the experiences that I had, the people that I really cared about that were experiencing burnout or signs of chronic stress and the detriments that it can have when you're not recovering from it. I viewed stress as this terrible thing for people, and it absolutely can be if you're not recovering from it. And we have the ability these days where a lot of our basic needs, safety, food, water, things are taken care of, to where some of these higher levels of our needs are ruminated on, and we can hold on to things for a lot longer where it can be detrimental.
Yeah.
But like you said, eustress is really just recovering from whatever the stressor was and then framing it in a productive way. That frame is essential though, because you keep
Mhm.
reflecting on how bad things were and how bad things are. That story will influence you and how you come next time around.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you say, you know what, man, I made it through that, you know, that's, but you're absolutely right. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, people, the very bottom rungs of food, shelter, air, water. I mean, those used to be kind of a big deal to meet those. And you needed to be the fittest to make sure that you had enough food or that you had shelter in a storm or that you could fight off whatever it was. I mean, that's just absolutely not the case anymore. I mean, there are absolutely poor people in our country. There are, people that, and across the world. But I mean, every person has a cell phone. Every person has, if not a home, someplace to sleep. Generally speaking, when it gets, especially in the U.S., some place that you can go to, and it's certainly suboptimal. But your people don't starve to death much anymore. So now we're up to those higher levels, and not having to work for that, I think, is sometimes to our detriment. It's we've improved. Obviously, we've um, and I don't know that it would be beneficial for us to go back to the Stone Age necessarily. I mean, it's unrealistic, but we we don't have the day to day hardships that the average person did 100, 200 years ago.
Agreed. But there's wisdom to be drawn from that. As you mentioned with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when your life has to be oriented toward your basic needs, ironically, the higher level needs are fulfilled. So
Mm.
your belonging, your self-esteem, even like your actualization, you have a purpose, and your purpose is to provide for your tribe or your family, where that is food, that is shelter, maybe that's security, which I believe is the next level up in the
Yeah.
high. But you are fully focused on maintaining the foundation. And then everything else comes with that full focus, which kind of relates to when you're going through hell on a 50-mile run, you sole focus on the task, good attitude, and you can help yourself get out of that. But yeah, the wisdom, I reflect on it pretty regularly from our ancestors. Yet we are lucky that technological revolution, civilization, all these things brought those basic level needs to not have literal survival be threatened every day. But the irony is, now that we are not oriented to that, in many ways, at least mentally, psychologically, we suffer more because purpose, sense of tribe and belonging and actualization is harder to find, um, unless you're pursuing it intentionally.
Yeah, and you have to. And then, being in the military, you're fortunate because you kind of get thrown into that. So I was, I joined right out of high school. I went from just being a son, of my parents and a high school student to a Marine. And that comes with this sense of purpose. Like you mentioned, there's, that transition is really hard for a lot of people when they lose it. Um, and that's, one kind of chunk of the group of people that I talk a lot to about, or talk a lot with about that is, hey, how do you, find something that allows you to have that sense of purpose. But, on the other side of the spectrum, my grandfather never saw the inside of a gym. Like running never crossed his mind. Like he ran when he needed to, I mean, he was a mechanic. He carried engine blocks and things around. He was strong as an ox. He, ran after a deer when he shot it, to track it or whatever the case was. So that was, there's, modernization or whatever has certainly brought, benefits, but it also, has brought, things that, our forefathers or whatever would laugh at us for. Well, you're going into you sit at a desk all day, and then you go into a place where you lift lead or steel. What are you doing?
And it's air conditioned.
Yeah.
You made a great point about the Marine Corps and the military and how it can
Mhm.
give some of those ancestral sense of purpose. And I think the Marine Corps, at my first duty station, as you know, Camp Lejeune. So my first experience in the military, I'm Navy medical, but the medical component of the Marine Corps is Navy. So a lot of my mentors were Marines outside of the hospital, whether it was through friendship or just people that I got to meet. So I'm this junior officer. And two of my best friends were master gunnery sergeants who lived at Quarters Landing. If you're familiar with that in Steeds Ferry, that's where I live.
Yeah.
Really close to Rick's, where I met my wife. But yeah, just talking to them and hearing their wisdom, but also the sense of pride that Marines have. Like you hear it in the language even. So like someone will talk about you and say that you're a Marine, not a former Marine, you're a Marine.
Mhm.
And you don't hear that as often for airmen or sailors. They're retired or they got out in this day. They're former, they're veterans. And Marines are Marines for life. And there's something powerful behind that language. It becomes a part of your identity. Hopefully not your whole identity, because that might get
Yeah.
hard, but a part of your identity and a sense of pride and purpose for what you accomplish and can continue accomplishing with that mentality that's imparted on you guys from day one.
Yeah, I think, there's absolutely a powerful part of it. There's also, it's so powerful sometimes, like you said, that when guys get out, they're lost. Um, so and that's, I think, it seems like it's becoming more and more common. Um, but being a Marine, it's absolutely what I was, and what I was looking for when I was a high school student. I wanted to do something, and I don't even know that I really realized that, but I wanted to be a part of something big. I wanted to be a part of something hard. I wanted to be accepted by people who, could do hard things. And that, you know, absolutely drove, me in my career to say, hey, what's the next hard thing I can try out for? Where's the next, because at every level you were working with a more select group of guys who held themselves to a higher standard, and kind of brought you up along with them, as
Yeah,
long as you were willing to do the work.
which is so important, right? Like you can want to be part of the tribe, but if you're not willing to do the work with the tribe, you probably won't be accepted by the tribe.
That's, I mean, one of the things we've constantly see is the biggest predictor of success for somebody that wants to come in any special operations branch is the absolute clarity of that idea in their head that I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to get, whether it's a SEAL or it's our guys or, a Green Beret, whatever, that, there's nothing that's going to stop me from getting this badge on my chest or this beret on my head. Um, and that's what we look for. That's what we select for. And it's powerful. I, one of the kind of frames that I use with people when I talk to them is I call it 5 C's, and clarity of mission is the first. You've got to be crystal clear on what it is that you want to achieve, or you'll never achieve it. And then you've got to commit yourself uh, to doing the things necessary to become the person or the thing or the whatever achievement it is. Then the courage to, definitely, moral courage, quite often, physical courage to do the things necessary to, particularly, I think more so for, non-military, if some of the people I coach, if they come home and they're like, hey, I'm super clear about wanting to get in shape. I'm committed to it. This is all, I'm ready to do it, but my wife and kids or my mom and dad are not, when I tell them that, hey, I'm not going to eat the food that you're making anymore, because it's, I have these goals, that takes courage, and then, the biggest, I think, consistency, you don't win a race or you don't win anything in a day. It's gotta be the product of small steps taken over time. And then the last C is curiosity, which I think, like I said, is kind of what I owe my whatever measure of success I've had to.
Powerful. I don't know if you've done a post on that in the past, but I missed it if you did. That
No, I need to.
5 Cs. 5 Cs. That's powerful stuff. And again, the stand hard, what you wrote today, or yesterday, and the concepts that you brought into that, which I assume is probably something that you use in your mentorship of
Mhm.
developing raiders. That hit home for me because you hear culture of excellence, and that's part of Marine Corps, obviously, part of many military communities, and it's part of industry. And you hear culture of excellence and trying to set that. And it tends to be when we think of culture, we tend to think of that externally and then adhering to
Mhm.
standards for whatever the organization might be. But man, I always like thinking about how do you apply concepts internally. And if I've seen it before and it just didn't absorb, maybe, but the internal culture that you wrote on and stand hard, that is some powerful stuff, brother.
Oh,
That's
thanks.
something you've had for a while. Is that a newer thing, or where'd that come from?
That I was relatively recently asked to talk with one of the MARSOC units about our history and then about culture. And as I started kind of putting that talk together, I came up with the idea that your unit culture, whatever, is a product of this Venn diagram that I put in there of the symbols and stories that you tell yourself or that people tell you or that they tell about the unit or the organization or the team. And then the overlap of the standards you hold yourself to and the systems that you put in place to make those standards reality. And often I think we pay like lip service to like, oh, our culture is, put the customer first. But if the the youngest, the sales clerk on your team sees you not putting the customer first, then you're telling a story, but you're not holding that standard. And that's the case in the military. A lot of times, it's you know sometimes we don't hold everybody to the same standard. There's a standard for this group of people, but not for the more the people that have been around for a while. And what in in an organizational setting, what matters is what the junior person believes. That's the culture. And then I started thinking of that, kind of applying that to almost everything that you can apply to an organization in some way, shape, or form, you can apply it to yourself. And if you do that, you like, what are the other kind of obverse side of that is that, and I'd read, I don't know where I read it, probably on Substack, but there was, uh, this idea of these three truths that the first is that you're a product of the stories that people told you about you, and then the stories that you tell yourself, and then um, you can't change any of those stories, in the past. You can only change them going forward. And in order to change them going forward, you've got to, start telling yourself new stories. And if you tell yourself that you're, uh, great boss, but your employees don't think you're a great boss, then there's a conflict between the story you're telling yourself and the standard you're holding yourself to, or at least the standard that they're seeing you hold yourself to. So you've got to, those two things have got to meet. And I think that's a lot of the difficulty that military people getting out have. They've been told stories, and then now they're not. They're unsure of what standards they need to hold themselves to. So when I finally realized, 5 or 6 years after I'd gotten out of the Marine Corps, that I was really out, I had to sit down and kind of have a, what they call a come to Jesus meeting. And you think, like, hey, I don't necessarily have to believe the things that the Marine Corps taught me, and they're all probably good, but, I need to, if I want to believe them, I've got to figure out why I believe them. I can't believe them because my drill instructor told me anymore. That was 26 years ago. I need to grow up and determine my own values and what my own culture is going to be, what kind of person I'm going to be now that I'm not, wearing a uniform that kind of dictates, how I'm supposed to act and hold myself and, account for myself.
Again, just so incredibly powerful. But you've said the word a few times, one of my favorite words, framing. And we can always reframe the stories that we tell ourselves. Like what has happened in the past has happened in the past. But that story can be told many different ways, no matter how tragic
Mhm.
the past was. You're still alive, like you said. And if you're
Mhm.
still alive, you can make that use stress. You can make that a reframe and or a story that you tell that can be empowering for yourself. And then great, we start getting the correct frame or the most beneficial for there's no right or wrong, and that's only for you to decide individually, and if it's productive for you or not. But if you find a framing that's productive for you and the story that you would want to tell about yourself, I love the idea of positive and productive self-talk, but how you unified that with standards and systems, because it's great if you have the story, but if you're not living by that story and trying to change yourself with it,
Mhm.
there's going to also be some slip ups. And then you brought up another topic I like to think about: external validation. So, for the people you care about, whether if you're a leader and the people that you're serving as a leader, husband or father, checking with your family. I mean, external validation gets shit on sometimes these days, and for good reason. If I'm worried about how many likes I get on a fucking post, then I probably should think about why I'm writing. But I do want to check in with the people I care about to see if the stories I'm telling myself and the systems I have in place to fulfill the values that I have individually and collectively, I want to make sure I'm on the same page as those people I care about. So external validation can be very beneficial in that regard. So you bringing that up, that sounds like it was a great talk.
Yeah, well, I thought so. Yeah, it went, and I got asked to give it a couple other times, so it's been good. Um, but yeah, and that's one of the reasons I love doing that because it gives me an opportunity to sit down, spend a day or a weekend or multiple days, like really kind of thinking about a topic and what can I bring to this that's new, or how can I, uh, make it worth the people who are listening to me's while. Because you definitely want them to. I think early in my career when I was a Marine, I kind of like to hear myself talk. I would. There's a story that I tell about coming back from Afghanistan and becoming an instructor, and I would just, I really, I mean, I felt that all of the Marines in the course that I was teaching were going to go to war, so I had to teach them everything that I knew, and so I would have them in there at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, just lecturing, and they're trying to stay awake and listen, and they want to be respectful, and um, then I finally realized I'm like, this is crazy. I've learned over time. I mean, a great book. A friend of mine, Joe McCormick, Brief. He runs the Brief Lab. The more the you know my goal whenever I set out to make a speech or a lecture or whatever is like, how can I make this as tight and impactful as possible, as short as possible. If you give me an hour, I'll talk for 30 minutes. Let's, you know, be respectful of people's time and do the work. I mean, it takes a lot longer and it's harder to, craft a post or a speech or a lecture, whatever, that's shorter. It's easy to get up and keep rambling on. So that's what I've learned to try to do, and it can be hard sometimes.
Well, I haven't heard many of your speeches, at least the ones that you're giving the Raiders that sound amazing, but I do read all your posts, and that comes across in your writing. You say a lot with very little, and that's a very valuable skill. Like, you first got to build up the courage to write in public, of course, or to speak in public. That's a skill in and of itself that took me a long time to become more comfortable with. But I'm still developing that muscle and that ability to write or say more with less, and there is power to it. And so when you can be brief but still say what you would want to say with twice the amount of words, or the written word, then yeah, that is a skill worth taking.
Yeah, there's an awesome quote by a guy, Blaise Pascal, who is a French, I think he was French, but uh, religious writer, and one of the letters that he wrote, he said, "I'm sorry that this letter was so long, but I didn't have time to make it shorter." And I try to keep that in mind. Like, and the military is horrible for that, or the way that we write things. Um, we just, ramble on. So that's one of my goals at work is, how can I, try to get guys to not, you know, just say what they mean, I think, and when you realize that, your boss, bosses, commanders, things like that, get 200-300 emails a day, on 3 different computer systems or like secret, unclassified, they appreciate brevity.
Yes, absolutely. Bottom line, upfront communication, say what matters, and then you can always be ready to give the depth if you need it, but talk up
Yeah.
front. I like that. So coming back to the ultra marathon long distance stuff, you mentioned it was 10 years from 2010 to right around 2020. Was it COVID that threw you off as far as
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So,
Yeah. Everything kind of shut down. I had been really training and preparing, and it was for this race called the Barkley Marathons. That's supposedly I mean, it's arguably, I guess, the most challenging ultra in the world. So in the 30 some years that it's been held, of only a handful of people have ever finished. And it's land navigation involved. And it's put on by this fella named Lazarus Lake, which is a name that he made up for himself. But the, um, see it's out in Georgia, and it's a roughly 25-mile loop. You run it in one direction, and you have to navigate your way to books that are hidden along the route. Depending on what your number is, you have to tear that page out of each book. Continue around. When you get back, then you go the opposite way. Then by that point it's dark, and then you go the opposite way again. And then and very few people make it to the final lap, you go in alternating directions, anybody this lap. So this race, not only is it almost impossible to finish, it's almost impossible to get into. So you have to kind of figure out how to apply. Your application has to be sent at exactly the right time, on the right day. And I had gotten onto the wait list, and it had been about a 5-year process. And each year I would, as long as I submitted my application correctly, start off at the same place that I was on the wait list. And then, 2 or 3 people would fall out for whatever reason. I'd gotten down to the top 5, and COVID hit, and they had to cancel the race. The next year, I was not ready for it, and the overseas runners were largely not allowed to attend from most countries because still COVID. And we got an email like a week before the race that said, "Hey, if you're on the wait list, just show up, and run." And I was like, "No, I'm not ready for it." And at that point, I really hadn't been training, and it had just kind of dwindled off. And I had gotten into, I kind of traded that for, the one thing you could do is just go to the woods and, do long hikes, rucks, backpacking. So I started going, 5 days a week or whatever, just backpacking in various country areas, Linville Gorge, different trails from North Carolina mostly. So I really got into that, and I have not run a ultra since. I still tell myself I'll get back into it one of these days.
So that's had you been rucking much, or was it just endurance running until the COVID hit in those few years?
That mostly we do. The Marines going through training will do like the standard is generally a 10 mile, 10 to 12 mile ruck, um, which is you can move at a 15-minute pace and pass. Nobody wants to just pass, so they almost everybody runs it. Um, I would go out with them. I had just years and years of in the Marine Corps. I built up a capacity, I guess, for being able to run with a ruck, and so I would go out with them and do it. Try to put them to shame. But yeah, I wasn't doing a lot of rucking outside of that. And that really just I think kind of lit the flame, and I really realized that hey, this is just a good time. The opportunity to get out in the woods, and it's great exercise.
And in those few years, I assume that's when you started, because you started, I believe, I think you've been writing 3 years on Substack. What came first, Walking Point or Ruck the Fuck Up?
Yeah, Walking Point. And it was initially called Think, Read, Write, Repeat for a while, and it was which I like. I still think it's a good name, but I kind of something I'm thinking about, something you should read, something about. And I'd started it because I was writing the book, and the goal was to kind of get people. So I'd talk a little bit about how my writing was going, and then some quotes. Then I was the repeat. And, in the first year, I think I started writing articles about rucking, and those kind of took off, and there was kind of two camps. There was one camp that was commenting on them and like, hey, talk more about this. And then there was another that's like, hey, we, don't care about this. So I decided, probably drunk, to like, hey, why not just write a second weekly newsletter? So I think that started January will be 2 years, I believe, for Ruck the Fuck Up, which is, I mean, it's become, I mean, I have a full-time job, but it's kind of certainly become a part-time job, writing, and it depends. It would varies wildly, but it's not uncommon that it's, Sunday night for Ruck the Fuck Up, and I'm trying to write something for the next morning, or Wednesday nights for Walking Point. I've I'm not an organized person. I really wish that I was, but I need to be. I kind of need the pressure of deadlines on me. So that's recently I had for work. I was sent to the UK, and had to you got to set out and get 3 weeks written ahead of time just to make sure that they would be, because that's something I've just prided myself in, that I haven't missed missed a week. And got that pressure of like, hey, I'm leaving on Monday, so I was able to get those knocked out.
Very impressive. I mean, one account is tough enough, particularly if you're posting weekly, and then two accounts that are, I mean, they they uh they combine well with each other. But
Yeah.
Walking Point is more like your wisdom through the years and how you apply it to a particular task. Where Ruck the Fuck Up is obviously around the skill and the pursuit that is rucking, but the mindset involved in it too. And I don't know which account I like more, because they're also entertaining, particularly Ruck the Fuck Up is. Was Ruck the Fuck Up part of your vernacular back in the day, or did you come up with that more recently?
It wasn't like a something that you heard all the time, but there was. I do remember one of my first team leaders. Just once in a while, I would be like, hey, Ruck the Fuck Up. And it had the double meaning of get your ruck on, it's time to go, but also stop complaining or whining. It's we got hard things to do, and so part of it, the Michael Easter's book came out. Well, I guess Go Ruck probably started first, and that started people started hearing more about rucking, and then definitely Michael Easter's Comfort Crisis. I
Yep.
think that was the first one, right? Um, like kind of blew up, rucking, and people start really getting into it, and uh, I was like, hey, that's something I'm very familiar with. It's a good opportunity to to write about. But I mean, it's not that you can't, but it's challenging to find something strictly about rucking to write about every week. Unless you're just going to like review boots and socks and things. So you kind of really, I mean, those two, mental toughness and doing hard things, go hand in hand. So I try to kind of pivot back and forth between, actual rucking information and then, the toughness, mental toughness derived from rucking or anything else that's really challenging.
My two favorite sources of knowledge when it comes to the pursuit of rucking, you and Michael Easter, for sure. And again, but the nuance that you both write with is like the benefits of the pursuit and the challenge of it, but also how to approach it safely at a manageable level based on your previous skill level. Because again, you go hard in the paint when you talk about mindset and toughness, but at the same time, you make it accessible for anyone at any age to start safely because it will be more in your mind first. It doesn't matter the amount of weight that you have on your back. It matters to get out there and get some steps in with some weight. And running with a ruck. So I've run with weight vests. I have not run much. I've done it a few times, but that's a different thing. So building that skill,
Yeah.
you have me intrigued.
And that's most people, and most people do not need to run with the ruck. That's absolutely the case. I mean, most people don't need to have more than 25, 30 pounds, probably, until you get to the point where you're like, I've got 25, 30 pounds and this is really easy. I want to try running and, drop the weight and give it a whirl. But, I mean, in the military, special operations, if you're training for something like that, then, absolutely you do. I do think that, while GoRuck has done a great, you know, job of making things accessible, a lot of people also think that, hey, I've got to go out and buy a $400 ruck if I'm going to do this, and then another $100 plate or whatever for weight, and you can find an old book bag and be fine, especially starting out. And then if you say, hey, this is not for me, you're put your JanSport back in the cupboard, and the milk cartons full of water or whatever that you use for weight, throw them away. If at some point you decide, hey man, yeah, I want to step up my game, then you can spend a lot of money. I mean, it can become a very expensive hobby quickly, and there's absolutely no need for it to be.
Yeah, it's funny you say I have a blue JanSport backpack that I have used a few times back in the day.
Yeah,
I have some nicer ones now, but like even sand, you can get 50 pounds of sand for $5, and then you can
yeah.
get the sand bags and tie them off and throw them in the backpack way ahead of time. And yeah, the progressive overload, the stimulus of doing something
Mhm,
at a manageable level, that where you're slightly uncomfortable for a little bit, recover, and then once you start getting comfortable, then yeah, let's see where we can go. But you
mm,
don't need to go from couch to 20 miles with 25 pounds on your back. And that's why in this 2025 Ruck Challenge that you
mhm,
have, which is so cool, not only the challenge and the personal benefit of the pursuit and how you've set it up and framed it through your writing and collaborating with your friend, but the cause
mhm.
behind it and what it's for. Can you tell me a little bit about the 2025 Ruck Challenge, which is still open, by the way, and I'll put that out for people that want to join in. I got some buddies that are going to do it with me, and
Awesome.
we're planning a few.
Yeah, it's we call it the Ruck 2025 challenge. So 20 miles, 25 pounds. Um, and it supports but in 2025. So you can wait till December 31st to do it. You can do it tomorrow, but if you sign up, we haven't. I should uh, be ordering the trial T-shirt to make sure it's cool. But if you sign up, it's $100 to sign up, but you get a T-shirt, you get a patch yet to be designed or made, but I'll mail those out. But the big thing is that the rest of the money is going to go to this cause to fight this. It's largely a childhood disease because most people don't make it past childhood. That's called FOP, and I can't pronounce the name, but it over time will turn the muscles, tendons, ligaments in the bone. I mean, which is there's a Marine that I work with, a Raider that whose son has this, and it's incredibly rare. I had never heard of it. There's maybe 1,000 people in the world that have it, um, and when I met him, he was training to do a half Ironman with a 45-pound ruck. So he did the run, the swim, towing it with fins, fin, and then the bike with it on. And I went out, did the ruck with him, and just like, hey, we can, let me try to do something to to help with this. So it's just, I mean, an opportunity. There's no real time limits on it. There's just get out and do it. And we had one of the coaches at work kind of built a progressive plan. So you literally, we started in September, I believe, but I mean, the goal is you should be able to do a couch to 20 mile, by the end of the year, a little bit of running, a little bit of walking, tailored to your ability. And then when you sign up, we have a Slack group that we put you in, and that just gives you the opportunity to, brag about what you've done, to ask questions, to get, advice and look for people that are close to you. So we haven't had a ton sign up. I think we're probably somewhere around 20. I had hoped to get 100. I don't know if we'll make it to that, but it'll be fun.
Absolutely. I mean, beautiful cause, wonderful personal challenge. And if people don't know already, because I didn't, but you can be guaranteed the T-shirt will be cool in the patch because ruck the fuck up. I didn't know you had a gift shop, and so I checked out your gift shop recently. And I couldn't help myself. I had to buy one of the shirts. Because are you designing these, or do you got somebody else that helps you?
Mostly it's been me. So the first one, I had this idea a long time ago about a shirt. So the pack that the military issued from Vietnam on until recently was called the Alice pack. And, that's what our wear collection, because it's very simple, very basic. It's very easy to fix if something breaks. And I just had the idea of the Alice pack being the patron saint of pain. There's like Saint Alice, and I was in a Mexican uh, supermarket, and they have the like votive candles that have the saints on them, and I just had this idea, and so that was the first thing that I made, this Saint Alice shirt, and then um, started talking with people and just started coming up with ideas. So it's grown. It's not. Um, Yeah, it's cool. I once in a while I like see somebody, walking around out in town with a shirt on. I'm like, yeah, I know that guy.
I,
So it's
I,
been cool.
I guess you've done pretty well in life with your military career, what you're doing now, but you may have missed your calling as a fashion designer because again, those shirts, those shirts are dope. Like, and they're variable. It's not like the same theme. There's very different types of styles. Again,
Hmm.
well done, bro. And
Oh,
that's awesome that you're designing them too. It's very
yeah,
cool. Very cool.
appreciate it. I do get my son's a one of his. He works as a chief marketing officer, but he has very um, not only ability with designing things on the computer, so he helps with some of the more challenging things. But it's been cool. It's an outlet that I wouldn't have ever imagined myself undertaking.
So cool. So coming back to exploring edges, you've obviously gotten away from the endurance running for now. You got into rucking. Some personal edges that you've explored in rucking and how it's compared to some of your harder runs. What have you done in the rucking space for the past 5 years that that's a little wild, maybe?
Um, I think for me, it probably less wild and less. I do some like with the Marines. We have started putting on an annual Norwegian foot march, which is a standard that was developed by the Norwegians after World War One or pre-World War One to make sure that all of their soldiers could, were fit. And it's 30 kilometers, so it's like 18.6 with roughly 25 pounds, and it's time standard of uh, depending on age, roughly 15-minute pace. So you got to be running some. So it's not that far off of the 2025 challenge. So we put that on. We're preparing. Next year will be the third iteration of that. So that I haven't done any distances longer than that. You know, in events. There's a couple of longish trails. So I've done some multi-day backpacking, 80, 100 miles, movements. The Art Loeb Trail in North Carolina is beautiful, a lot of hills. And that for me, I don't go into something like that with with any concern for time. Really, it's just I'm gonna walk all day. I'll get up in the morning, make some oatmeal and coffee, and eat a couple granola bars at lunch, and find a place to throw up a tent before the sun goes down. But for me, that's I love that so much. Meditative. Um, and I really enjoy solitude. So, being able to get out and do that, and that's next weekend. My goal is to get out at least for a couple days, and I hadn't. I'd been just so busy with everything that I realized I hadn't gotten out and um, in the woods by myself for a while. So I'm looking forward to that.
The movie meditation of it. It's absolutely what I have found with rucking versus I like to trail run without weight, but you're moving faster and you're focusing on that task, so it's harder to kind of embrace the nature around you, appreciate any sounds or sights. And don't get me wrong, you ruck long enough, it's gonna cook you from the inside out. Is how it
Yeah,
feels for me. It's a different kind of burn, but it's still like. I can focus in on my breathing more. I can find more appreciation in the moment. But it's probably because have a bad attitude about running. I do it because it's hard, and I still
yeah.
do it, but I don't appreciate. I don't have as good of an attitude. You're helping me tonight, by the way. With
Yeah, well, I mean, running, like trail running, I do a lot of that, but you really, and my whole time in the Marine Corps, if you were the point man, you were the guy walking point, you were in front, you really got to be looking at the ground. Because there could be, IEDs, obviously, or booby traps or whatever the case may be. And then if you're trail running, you've really got to be looking at the ground. So one of the things I found with rucking or backpacking is, man, once you like lift your head and start looking in the tops of trees and, um, you just see so much more. It's, I, uh, out Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, I was doing a long hike there and, walking along and looked up and there's, mama bear and two cubs like right above, above my head up in a tree. And I'm like, man, that's, I wouldn't have seen that, if I was running. I would have, and luckily I didn't have to run. They stay there and watch me and watching them.
Beautiful. Well, like I told you early in our conversation, I have not run a marathon before, and my actually first covering on foot of a distance greater than 20 miles will be with 25 pounds on my back.
Nice.
We have a loop around a lake here called it's called St. Mary's River State Park. It's not a river, it's a lake. Either way, it's named that. It's a 7.5 mile loop. So I got a group of guys, and we're just gonna hit that loop 3 times, plan it out with some water and stuff. But I am so stoked to take on this challenge for that cause and cover that ground for the first time. Inspired by you and your friend.
Oh, well, that's awesome.
Yeah, this has been an absolute pleasure, brother. I could talk to you all night. I hear my kids starting to wind down in the other room. So I'm gonna help the wife out there, but my goodness, keep up what you are doing. Inspiring wisdom, inspiring what you're doing. And it's probably worth noting, how old are you now?
I am 56.
And you look fantastic. And we talked ahead of time that you feel as strong and as good as you ever have. And that speaks a lot to, of course, your career and how you stayed after it. But it hasn't been like you haven't had hiccups. I know you had shoulder surgery recently
Yeah.
and you recovered from that, and we could talk on that for a while. But short story is you went through the physical rehab, you listened to trainers, and now you are strong and as fit as you've ever felt. And you're doing amazing things like this, not only to better yourself, but to help other people in the process. And what better purpose in life? Selfish and selfless at the same time. I try to approach all domains that way. How can I get
Yeah.
better myself so I can sustain my ability to serve others? And you are a walking example of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and you, yeah, you as well. But I get a lot out of reading your stuff, especially the notes. Just your quick quotes and thoughts that you throw up. So I definitely appreciate those.
Thank you, brother. And actually, they come to me during physical pursuit. So a lot of my
Yeah, they all
creativity.
do.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
it was, I don't know if it's Saint Francis of Assisi or somebody that said Salvatore ambulando, which is it is solved by walking. That's where I write most of my posts. In my head is when I'm rucking or running or whatever the case is. So it's definitely um, meditative, like you mentioned, and also the opportunity to get away from all of the nonsense, the phones and computers and things like that for a little bit, and you benefit. I mean, in more ways than just physically. I mean, definitely mentally as well.
100%. And if I recall, and that great podcast you had with Jack Carr, you mentioned that you may be working on another book. So that is very exciting to hear. Only good things coming from this one. I know the story. I have not read the book yet because I'm a piece of shit. It's been on my stuff. It's on my to-do list and it's high on it, and I can't wait to read it. I've heard you talk about it enough, so it's gonna be fun to see the
Yeah,
finished
yeah,
version.
you probably got it. You got the gist of it. No need to read it.
I'm 100% reading it, and I can't wait to see what's coming next, both through
Awesome.
Substack and your books. And we'll stay in touch, brother. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I definitely appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. Talk soon.
All right, take care.
Bye now. You too.